قال الله العظيم في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين قالوا ربنا الله ثم استقاموا تتنزل عليهم الملائكة ألا تخافوا ولا تحزنوا وأبشروا بالجنة التي كنتم توعدون. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. The perfection of humanity lies within the perfection of the soul. The moral and spiritual perfection cannot be achieved or attained without purifying the soul. This is the whole reason, this is the whole purpose of why we are discussing taqwa. So we can become that perfect human. That human that is the exemplary human, that has the entitlement, that has the right to be labeled as a human being. Otherwise, we do not have this right. We are no less than, as Allah Azza wa Jal describes in His book, إِنْهُمْ إِلَّا كَالْأَنْعَامِ بَلْ هُمْ أَضَلُّ سَبِيلًا. When He says, surely they are like cattle, and He says, nay, they are worse than cattle. So that if I don't act as I should, then I'm nothing more than this description. If we look at what the philosophers describe a human as, they call him a hayawan natiq. A philosopher describes a human as an animal that communicates. We don't perceive them as this in Islam. A human is not an animal. A human is a living entity. However, what differentiates man from other creations is the fact that man has intellect. Man can communicate, unlike everyone else, in the manner that they communicate, and we are able to come to some kind of understanding with our communication. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen says that man has been created with the power of speech, and this is the essence of humanity. Afwan, could you please move, because you're in my ear and I can't understand what I'm saying. Please, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam speaks about in Wasf al-Muttaqeen, he says, Mantiquhum al-Sawab. The first thing that he describes in the description of the Muttaqi, of the one that has taqwa, he says, Mantiquhum al-Sawab. Al-Muttaqun hum ahlul fada'il mantiquhum al-Sawab. The first thing that comes to mind, the first thing that Amir al-Mu'mineen says, that these people are the people of distinction, that these people are the people of virtue, mantiquhum al-Sawab. That when they speak, as-Sawab, mantiquhum, when we say someone nataq, it means someone spoke. It's how we communicate. That when they speak, mantiquhum al-Sawab, what they say, Sawab means what is right. So the first thing that comes to mind when you describe al-Muttaqi is that when they speak, they only say what is right. This is the whole meaning behind this. We ask ourselves that, do we need to speak? We have the ability to speak. But is it necessary for us to speak? Now we have useless chatter. Just making conversation, as they say. You know, during lunch hour at work, when you sit and talk about nothing. You discuss nothing, absolutely nothing. You talk about absolutely useless things, whether during lunch hour, after work, making conversation as they call it. There's no problem with talking in general. Allah Azza wa Jal does not say it's forbidden to talk, as long as you swim between the flags. Now, because if you don't swim between the flags, you get caught in a rip and you end up drowning. And this is what happens when we enter this form of talking. Sometimes it could be something meaningless. Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullah. We could be talking about someone, just general talk. And it's borderline ghibi, as they say. And then suddenly it falls into ghibi. We start to backbite without realizing that we've reached this point. This is the main problem when it comes to useless chatter or useless chit-chat. When you speak also, you need to know that you're giving someone what? You're giving him a piece of yourself. Sometimes you say that. I'm going to go give someone a piece of myself. That I want to tell them what I think. That when you speak, the moment you speak, you are actually giving someone a piece of yourself. You are allowing them to understand who you are. You know, sometimes you hear someone say something and they say, oh, that was expected of him. And then someone else says something, did he really say that? That person say that? Others, you expect some remarks or words that they say, because you understand the way that they speak. Even as children, we were reminded, whether at school or by the children reminded by their mothers. You know, your school teacher, I remember when I was in year 1, and the teacher would say to someone, what does your mother say? If you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. Mothers do say that, and then they go to someone's house, have a cup of coffee over gossip and what have you. But the thing is that they tell you, if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything at all. There's no point. If I don't need to talk, I shouldn't talk at all. Because Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says, وَهَانَتْ عَلَيْهِ نَفْسُهُ مَنْ أَمَّرَ عَلَيْهَا لِسَانَهُ. هَانَتْ عَلَيْهِ نَفْسُهُ. That someone basically that empowers their tongue debases themselves. How? That when they speak and they let their tongue do the talking do the thinking and the talking, they put in themselves in a position, because there's another narration, Ali ibn Abi Talib, he says that when you speak, he says your tongue, remember your tongue's got how many doors to stop it from speaking? You got your teeth, and then you've got your lips, a pair of teeth, 2 sets. You got your bottom jaw, the top part of your jaw, and then you got your lower lip and your upper lip. You got all these seals before your tongue speaks. So this whole time you're prevented from talking. You open these doorways and then you speak. So Allah makes sure you're prevented that much before you let people know what you want to say. But once I've said something, the Imam says that your tongue is your hostage. And when you speak, you become a hostage to your words. As the Italians say, la lingua non ha ossa ma rompe le ossa, which means the tongue has no bones, but it breaks bones. So sometimes you may say something that my tongue has no bones, but sometimes a word that I may say can cause something to take place. Can cause, as we will discuss over tonight and the following nights, what the tongue can do. Your tongue is your tongue. It isn't your brain. Its purpose is to speak. But it is your intellect that empowers the tongue and lets it know what to say. This is why we have the aql, which is the president of the country, the president of the body, and the tongue says the communications minister. So imagine the country was being run by the Minister of Communication. Australia wouldn't be a bad idea. Malcolm Turnbull will do a better job than Tony Abbott. But that's not the case. The communications minister does not speak unless he's told what to say. He is told what to put forward. And this is the way the tongue is. Because if the tongue is like a beast, as the Imam says, Al-lisanu sab'un in khuliya anhu aqar. He says the tongue is a sab'a. A sab'a is what? A carnivore, a beast. Imam Ali alayhi salam says. He says if you let it loose. So imagine someone has a trained pit bull terrier or a trained Rottweiler or something like a wild dog, and they just let it run loose on the people. He says if you let it loose, aqar, which means what? Becomes rabid. It becomes wild, in the other word. That it becomes wild. If you let your tongue do what it wants, it says what it thinks. What it feels like saying, it just says, I'm here to talk, and it speaks if you don't put any control mechanism over it. But is it necessary for me to talk? Amir al-Mu'minin Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says to Kumail, he says to him, لا تقل ما لا تعلم بل لا تقل كل ما تعلم. Firstly, he says to him, which is something badihi, as we say, something that's a given, something that's known. It's not something that you need to be taught. He says, don't say what you don't know. Always mention this proverb, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. People walk in and they say, I know, I know how this works. Or I know what this can do. And I have an understanding of this issue. I have an understanding of that issue. And they get themselves into trouble. People that, for example, in the world that don't respect electricity. People that, you see the people that used to do the train surfing. And they don't realize electricity arcs. Some people don't know that. Some people see a live wire, 1500 volts, and they think as long as I don't touch it. They don't realize it arcs. That the current will come out and it will zap you, it will take you. They don't understand that, alaykum salam. They don't have this understanding and they don't respect it. When you don't respect something, that's when you get yourself into trouble. And that's why it says, the proverb says fools rush in. So a fool will act because he doesn't know how to deal with something. He doesn't know what the ramifications of an action will be. They don't understand this. Now Imam says to Kumail, لا تقل ما لا تعلم. Don't say what you don't say. Don't say what you don't know. But then he goes one step further. He says, بل لا تقل كل ما تعلم. Don't say everything you do know. Firstly, don't say what you don't know. Don't speak with something that you don't know. And don't say everything that you do know. I might know something for certain, but لكل مقام مقال. In every situation, every place, there is something different to say. Who here has the same conversation with their wife as they have with their child, as they have with their close friend, as they have with their work colleague, as they have with a perfect stranger in the street? You are legally insane if you do that. Insane. You can't have the same conversation with everyone. Every person has a different there is a different way or a different manner for you to talk to them. And nothing that you say just disappears in the wind. Nothing vaporizes. Nothing vanishes. It always comes back to haunt you. Just like when someone goes for election, notice they dig up all the dirt on this person. You said this, you said that. Start playing the videotapes. In life, this is what happens. You come out of nowhere to mention something, they say, "Lek min am yahki." Look at this guy, he's talking. Remember yesterday he said this, so many days ago he said that, so many years ago. They bring back everything you say comes back to haunt you. Sometimes when you have an opinion on something, you turn around and you go, "Oh, this so-and-so, this person's a so-and-so. Or this person's sister is in so-and-so," and then it falls upon you. And then how do you reply that? This person's a thief. Then it falls back onto you. How do you reply to that? The best thing is to keep quiet. I always tell the boys, don't tell people tales about your heroics, you know. Everyone that tells these tales comes out and describes himself as if they are modern day Samson or Hercules. Then a fight goes down, what happens? Generally, Mr. Samson or Hercules is the first one to run. Everyone says, "Hada al-batal." Because your words come back to haunt you. If you say, "I can't fight," this is what I tell people, always say, "I can't fight." Why? If something does happen and you run, people say, "Well, he said he couldn't fight." But if you put up, they say, even the coward put up. You know, the one that can't fight put up. You become something. Rather than put yourself in a position where you will be debased, where you'll be degraded, where you'll be humiliated. Also, sometimes when you're silent, you'd be surprised what people say about you. And it's always the quiet ones that know everything. You've heard the saying where they say, still waters run deep, or something like that. That this person, he's a thinker. There's even another proverb that people say. They say it's better to be considered a fool and keep your mouth shut than open your mouth and remove all doubt. At first, sometimes people go, "But this person doesn't understand, he's foolish." But then when you open your mouth, you go, "MashaAllah, right on, exactly what I thought." Let it continue as someone considering it. Don't let it be a certainty. This is why they say silence is golden. If you take a look at Luqman al-Hakim. Luqman al-Hakim was not a prophet. This is the first thing you need to understand. That this man was not a Nabi. He wasn't a ma'soom, like a prophet that Allah has sent. But he was a thinker. Not only was he a thinker, he was silent and he would think all the time. And when he uttered words, his words were golden. They were so golden that Allah Azza wa Jal names a surah. He names a surah in the Quran after him, and he puts these pearls of wisdom for us to read. Honestly, in one discussion with his son, when you read, when he speaks to his son, where he says, "Ya Bunay." Just to begin with, "Ya Bunay." When he speaks with his son, when he talks to his son, he speaks in a respectful manner. He doesn't say "Ula." He says "Ya Bunay." Right from the start. And then he gives him advice about life. Point after point. And he explains things that people don't know and people did not look upon. Allah Azza wa Jal, because our discussion isn't about Luqman. Allah Azza wa Jal quotes these words of Luqman in the Quran, and Ahlul Bayt alayhum salam mention the words of Luqman. Imagine your words are that great that the Quran and Ahlul Bayt, the two pivotal points of your faith, the two most important factors in Islam, speak of your words. Because Luqman only spoke what was right and was necessary. It's not good always to be silent. There are points where you have to speak. As-sakit an al-haq Shaytanun akhras. Someone that does not speak when there's truth needs to be spoken is a silent devil. Sometimes it is necessary for you to speak, but at the required time. It's not good to talk too much. You know, they say empty vessels make the most sound. But it's true. When someone sits there and says anything, the Imam says, salawatullahi alayh, says, qalbul ahmaq fi fih. Qalb al-ahmaq, the fool's qalb here meaning their aql. When you see qalb in certain scenarios means something different. Here it means the aql, the intellect of the ahmaq, of the fool, fi fih. Fih means his nozzle, his mouth, his spout. That's where his aql is. The fool, this is how he thinks. He thinks there. He just says whatever arrives. Whatever's on his mouth, he just says it. Whatever's on his tongue, he says it. He says, وَلِسَانُ الْعَاقِلِ فِي قَلْبِهِ. He says the tongue of the one that has aql, the one that has intellect, is within his heart. That's the difference. See, because the fool speaks, then he just tries to justify what he says. You know, someone says something, and you know exactly what they mean. And then you say, you said this. He says, that's not what I meant. Always play semantics on every sentence they say. They always want to play on words. Whereas the aql says the word, the right word at the right moment. Because he's weighed it so much, before he says it, he doesn't have to do reparations. He doesn't have to rectify or remedy or look for some way out and fix the problem that they have put there. If we look at the saying for Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says, وَإِنَّ لِسَانَ الْمُؤْمِنِ مِنْ وَرَاءِ قَلْبِهِ, which we explained that the tongue of the aql being the mu'min, the intellectual person, is the believer. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam says that an intellectual person is a believer. A believer is an intellectual person. No one can be considered intellectual. Don't look at academics these atheists, that they're not intellects. Because remember, someone like, you've probably seen his debates so often, Dan Barker. Dan Barker, for example, was a priest. He's not a member of Mensa. Mensa is not only Mensa. Mensa is the top 0.1% most intelligent people, they say, in the world. 0.1% in the world. Top 0.1%, top 3%, is Mensa. You make Mensa if you're in the top 3% in the world. He is part of a society called the Prometheus Society, which is 0.06% of the world. They are the most intelligent society, they say. And if you look, and I don't want to go over this point, I just want you to go into YouTube and look at his debate with a priest called Father Rodriguez. Rodriguez debates with this guy, and honestly, someone that's a half-wit, with no intelligence, would not even come up with the argument this guy had. When I say it lacks intelligence, if you look at it, just right, if you're going to look, because I might as well say it, because I'm going to get lost with the other point. He actually says to him, because they're talking about the creation of the world coming by chance. And he says to him that if I found a bottle of milk, the priest says, if I found a bottle, أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. He says that if I found a bottle of milk inside my fridge, if any of you were to find a bottle of milk inside your fridge, how would you assume that this bottle arrived in your fridge? If I asked you, you woke up in the morning, a bottle of milk is sitting inside the door of your fridge. An intelligent person says, oh, someone purchased it and placed it there. This is what Reverend Rodriguez said. And Dan Barker replies with an answer I've never heard before. And I don't think anyone could be stupid enough to reply with such an answer. Really. He says there is a possibility that the motor in the fridge that's in the shop, the takeaway shop, blew up. And from this explosion, the bottle of milk flew out the door. This is what he says. Then it went out the door. And due to the forces from this explosion, the bottle made its way all the way to your house. Listen to this. He said, then bust through the door without wrecking the lock, just from the force, and the door closed behind it. The bottle went in, the same force caused the door of the fridge to open and the bottle of the milk to sit upright, then the door closed. You know, if someone replied like that, I would have got up and walked out. Really? How can you sit with someone? مَا لَكُمْ كَيْفَ تَحْكُمُونَ? How can this be something that someone that speaks like that to you does not take you seriously? This guy belongs to the Prometheus Society. This guy is someone with an IQ that probably tops 170, 160, 100. This is someone with a really big IQ. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam says, a person of intelligence is a believer. An intellectual is a believer. You can't be an intellectual and think like that. So then, this is what he says, وَإِنَّ لسان المؤمن من وراء قلبه وإن قلب المنافق من وراء لسانه, which we explained that the person that's foolish, he is described as a hypocrite, that their tongue, that their heart is upon their tongue. So it says لأن المؤمن, he says, and he explains why. He says, لِأَنَّ الْمُؤْمِنَ إِذَا أَرَادَ أَنْ يَتَكَلَّمْ بِكَلَامٍ تَدَبَّرَهُ فِي نَفْسِهِ. That the mu'min, when he wants to speak, he sits and thinks about what he's about to say. He thinks of all the scenarios and then finally speaks. He says, فَإِنْ كَانَ خَيْرًا أَبْدَاهُ وَإِنْ كَانَ شَرًّا وَارَهُ. Basically, he says if what he is about to say is good, he'll reveal it. But if what he is about to say is bad, he will conceal it. You know, inside words and outside words. Some words shouldn't become outside words. That's what I think, but I shouldn't say that. They'll think I'm insane. So I'll keep that inside. I won't allow that to come out. Because this is how people view you. Did you actually just say that? This is what they think. So he thinks about it. Then he says, وَإِنَّ الْمُنَافِقَ يَتَكَلَّمْ بِمَا أَتَى عَلَى لِسَانِهِ لَا يَدْرِ مَاذَا لَهُ وَمَاذَا عَلَيْهِ. This guy has his angels on his shoulders working overtime. He just says whatever he wants. He does not care. The munafiq, the hypocrite. مَاذَا لَهُ. مَاذَا لَهُ means what? مَاذَا لَهُ, what is of his, is a positive, what is of benefit to him on the day of judgment. وَمَاذَا عَلَيْهِ means what will become a burden upon him on the day of judgment. Accountability for what he said. Because he's accountable for everything that he says. And he has to stand for this. This is just a small introduction, even though it took up our time, when it comes to speech. Over the next 2 nights, inshallah, we'll discuss what speaking to the point is and what are the ailments of the tongue and the importance of having a pure tongue in speech. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to purify our thoughts in this month and make our speech a speech that is only of benefit for us in this world and in the next, and make our tongue stand for truth in order that it witnesses for us on the day of judgment that it was used for what was asked for. We ask Allah to forgive us our sins in these nights. وهذا والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.